Hello, 672 students. This is Dr. Tyler, and we're recording Unit 6, which is also Module 6. And this is on learning preference differences. I just thought I'd remind you that the research paper is due October 17th. So that's about 3 weeks from now. And hopefully you're pacing yourselves and finding out some good information on your topics. Before we jump into today's lesson, I wanted to let you know that I've broken this module into 3 sections, and I'm making it into a YouTube video so that you can stream it and you won't have to wait for it to download to your computer. So hopefully that will work a little bit better than just recording the whole lesson in one big lump. Okay. Last week we had 2 units. We had perception and memory, and the unit on memory did have a couple of review questions on perception. So today we'll just have a few review questions on memory. And then we'll go on to today's topic, which was learning preference differences. The module learning objectives, you can see there are 2. After you read the selections that I've posted, and after you complete this module, you should be able to describe the different ways of learning that individuals with disabilities might have, including students who come from culturally diverse backgrounds. And you should also learn some strategies to address those differences and to help these students be more successful in your classrooms. The second bullet is about your ability to describe how the student's attitudes, interests, and values impact that student's academic and social abilities. And in particular, of course, today we're talking about their interests and attitudes and how that impacts their learning. Okay, a couple of review questions. The first one, since your immediate memory can hold around blank chunks of information, the teacher can help students remember information by blanking it. Hopefully remember that our immediate memory can hold about 4 chunks of information, and that chunking is a very good strategy that we can do to help students remember. So chunking information, organizing it into categories. Here's your second one. What 4 factors affect your immediate memory and active working memory? Moving on. Unit 6, so learning preference differences. The first reading by Raymond was about cognitive styles research. What are cognitive styles? What do we mean by that? There are 2 concepts to know in terms of cognitive style, and the first one is field dependence versus field independence, and the second one is reflectivity versus impulsivity. So the first one, field dependence, also known as field sensitive, and field independence. So what is meant by the term field dependence? And what is meant by the term field independence? This is a sample test item that is administered when, for example, a psychologist is trying to determine the cognitive style of a person. So they would show, you can see the top figure. It says here's a simple form which we have labeled X. And then below it says this simple form named X is hidden within the more complex figure below. So my question to you is, can you find figure X? How easily can you spot it? Okay, and here I have clearly labeled it for you. For those people who can see it very easily, it's hard to understand how could somebody miss it? How could you not see it? But believe me, I have shown this slide several times to several different classes, and there are many students who have a hard time picking out just that triangle from all the other shapes that are showed below in that larger, more complex figure. As you may have figured out, those who are able to find that figure very easily tend to be more field independent. And students who are field dependent or field sensitive find all of that other distracting stimuli, it just kind of clutters the field and it makes it harder to pick out the targeted information. So what characteristics are associated with somebody who is field independent? And then what are the characteristics that are associated with the field dependent processing style? There really are some notable differences between the two approaches. And as you look at the next slide, be thinking about how these differences could contribute to a student not being able to learn as well as she or he might if the classroom instruction were more aligned with her or his own cognitive style. So I won't read these, I'll let you read them. That's field independent. Now compare that to field dependent. You can see how it's a very different way of approaching learning. You can see how different a person who is field dependent is from a person who's field independent. What might you, the teacher or professional, need to be aware of when you have students who are field independent sitting right alongside students who are field dependent in the classroom? Think about some of those differences. Goals, reinforcement, structure, even criticism. The second cognitive style talked about in Raymond was impulsivity versus reflectivity. So what is meant by the terms impulsivity and reflectivity? This is referring to the speed with which an individual reaches decisions and whether the individual thinks about the actions before acting. Okay, so those two elements kind of hand in hand. Speed as well as if you think about it and reflect before you act. There was a quote from the reading that I thought was important. It says, "The critical issue is not the actual speed of taking action, but rather the presence or absence of an effective and deliberate process prior to acting." So out of those two, speed and reflection, reflection is more critical. And if you've been in the schools, I'm sure you've encountered students who do not reflect before they act. And they open their mouth and say something, or they engage in some kind of behavior that gets them into trouble, and we're left wondering, surely he knew that if he did that, he would get in trouble. And yet he went ahead and did it anyways. And it's his cognitive style, impulsivity versus reflectivity. Another example, you might have a student who often raises his or her hand to answer questions without even thinking of an answer first. And then when you call on him, he's spluttering, he's trying to pull up something out of his memory. And again, the teacher is left wondering, why did he raise his hand if he hadn't even thought through to an answer? What about the scenarios in the book? This was Raymond chapter 9, and if you had the Pearson excerpt, it's on page 9. If you have the whole book by Raymond, you'll need to kind of snoop around in chapter 9 to find it. But there's a section that talks about impulsivity and reflectivity. See if you can describe at least 3 strategies that you could implement to assist and support either John or Elaine. So there's a box down the bottom that had 2 little scenarios about these students. Are you impulsive or reflective? There's, when you click on this link, which I am not going to do, but I certainly invite you to do it, it will open with a color test. And you simply follow the directions, and you'll find out if you tend to be more impulsive or reflective. So I'm not going to pause while you do this, but I would suggest that you pause this video and go out and do that. I think you'll enjoy it. But more importantly, think about the impact of an impulsive versus reflective cognitive style on a child's learning. How might that impact his learning? And then think about how might this impact his behavior. And I think it's important to think about this cognitive style because it kind of takes the stigma out of impulsive behavior. Instead of thinking badly of the student because he's impulsive, think of it as it's something with his cognitive style rather than a moral failure on the part of the student.